Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar from ATA Engineering, Organizing Your Models with Femap Groups. My name is Jonathan Hill. I am an engineer here at ATA's Washington, D.C. office, and I'm really excited to be joined by my colleague Laura from our Denver office for today's feature presentation. Before we get that far, I do have a couple quick slides just to give a little background information on ATA and an overview of how we might be able to help you out. So ATA is well known as our experience for providing high value engineering services, where we have years and years of expertise in test and analysis driven design. Our staff are really passionate about helping our customers overcome their most difficult product design challenges, and we have experience across a wide range of industries. Traditionally, aerospace and defense is where a lot of our projects take place, but we also have experience with robotics and controls, themed entertainment, and more. And specifically for the software, we're really able to leverage our experience using the tools through our role as a Siemens partner and value-added reseller. In that capacity, ATA offers training, free resources, and hotline support for a number of really great simulation products. That includes Femap, which we'll be discussing primarily today, but it also includes others like SimCenter Nastran, SimCenter 3D, and Star CCM Plus, as well as NX CAD and CAM and more. Engineers like Laura here at ATA staff a technical support hotline, and that's available from the beginning of the day on the East Coast until the end of the day on the West Coast. You can get to that either by phone or on the web. And ATA actually develops the official SimCenter Nastran training materials for Siemens, and we're their preferred provider of training in North America for SimCenter Nastran. Finally, ATA is recognized as a Smart Expert Partner by Siemens, and we have validated expertise in Femap, Star CCM Plus, and SimCenter 3D. So after the webinar, I would invite you all to check out our website. You might not have noticed our website recently shifted. So we moved from having two separate websites, we consolidated all on one website. So I invite you to check everything out. All the same old great content is still there. So that includes our latest training calendar. You can get to the hotline there and free resources. So we're always adding new on-demand webinars and Femap APIs and white papers and stuff, all for free, available to anyone. And that's all specifically for you guys. So if you come up with a new idea or there's anything you want to see that isn't out there, please reach out and let us know, and we'll see if we can make it happen. With that, I'm excited to turn things over to Laura. Laura, all yours.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. Again, my name is Laura Hoffman. I am a senior project engineer in the Denver office. And today I'm going to be talking about organizing models with Femap groups. So I use Femap every day. I think the groups functionality within Femap is great, and I'm going to highlight a few of those things today. So Femap is a great tool for making groups. It's really good for your finite element model that has a lot of different pieces, a lot of parts, or it's a very large model. So Femap is good for making those groups, for visualizing your model. If you want to look at specific results, you want to do your documentation in a certain way where you're looking at the model in a specific way. So it's really good for that. This presentation is a demo to highlight some of those grouping basics. We'll also go over Boolean operations, and I'll highlight a few APIs that specifically use groups that I think are really useful. I'm going to note that this presentation will not cover layers, and this demo does assume that you have some basic knowledge of how to use Femap. I'll start with some grouping basics on this slide. We'll go into the demo soon. What can be in a group? Well, anything that's in your FEM. I primarily use Nastran, so anything that's in your Nastran deck, your nodes, your elements, coordinate systems, material properties, but also your glue or contact regions, those definitions and properties, or your loads and constraints. So outside your analysis deck, you have geometry that in your Femap model that can also be in a group. Down to just a point or a curve on some of those entities. And I did want to highlight that when you are importing a model, there's a great feature within Femap where you can automatically create groups based on include files. A lot of times in Nastran, we will split out our parts into different include files. And if you go to your file preferences into the interfaces tab, there is this checkbox next to create groups from include files, and it will just automatically create all those groups for you when you import your Nastran deck. When you're creating a group, you can do it by two ways. You can do it by ID or by rules. So if you're doing it by ID, let's say you have a list of some nodes, you want to look at specifically those IDs between like 201, 396, something real specific. You can do that. Or you can do grouping by some rules. So I want to view all of the elements in this model that have property 100. And I did want to note that an entity can be in more than one group at a time, which is actually really useful for when you're viewing your groups. You can view just the active group, or you can use multiple groups, which is helpful if you got things in more than one group. Let's say you have a part in one group and then half of it in another group. You can show the main part, but hide the half that you don't want to see. And I'll highlight this in the demo. One quick note is that I think these groups work really well with Nastran debugging. A couple of examples here. Let's say you've got some geometry issues. You see this in your Nastran FO6 file. Got some tetrahedral elements, a bunch of IDs are listed. I want to go look at these elements and fix those geometries. We can just column select those IDs in your text editor and just copy that over to a Femap group to view it really easily. Or another example is your analysis failed out. You've got a node that's attached to multiple RBE rigid element legs, and the analysis can't work like that. So, hey, here's the ID of the node where that happens. You can easily go into Femap, view that ID of that node, and then also what's connected to that. All right, next we're going to get into the demo. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is just some grouping basics. I'll go over how to create a group, rename it, how to add items or subtract items from the group, and what are the several different options you have to do that. Copying, combining groups, and a little bit about how to display your groups. So I'm going to go over to my Femap. And this is the model that I'll be using for my demo today. As you can see, I have a few groups in here already listed under the groups and the model info. The first thing is how to create one of these. Well, you have a couple options. If you have some groups, just right click and go to new. If you don't have any, just right click on the groups and you can create your first group that way. It will automatically populate one of the next IDs that's available, but you can reset this to a specific ID that's not already taken. So what I'm going to create here is, let's do part of this helicopter here. And here I have that new group, but how do I know what's in it? Well, I'm going to show you the way that I view things, and that's, I like to turn on this entity editor here. And I have it in this part of my Femap view. This is how I like to view things. And in here in my entity editor, it shows you the number of items for all these different kinds of items you can have in a group. And right now, these are all 0 because I have nothing in this group. But I'd like to go ahead and add some stuff. There are two ways. The two main ways that you can do that is under group here at the top. So all these items down here are things that you can put into your group. And under any of these, if you go here and you click ID, that's going to add any of those elements by ID. You can get to the same thing through the entity editor. If you highlight one of these rows and this button over here with the 3 little dots, you click this, it's the same thing as going group element ID. So I'm going to use that method. Brings up the dialog box where I can add or remove things to my group. I'm going to just box select some of these elements to add in here. So that's what I've added. If you want to subtract anything from ID, you can use this remove Same thing, you can do individual IDs or box selecting there. And you can see all the IDs listed here and then those that I just took out. So right now I'm viewing the full model, and I can tell this because when I right click over here in my model info, I can see that it's highlighted as show full model. But I want to switch to one of these other options here, which is show active group or show multiple groups. So this new group that I created, part of body, is active right now. And I know that because it's bold and it's colored blue. If I right click and go to show active group, it's going to show that one that I just created. Those are those elements I put in there. So now I'm going to create one by property. This is the other one if you want to create a group by rules. So I'm going to add one that's all the elements for a specific property that I have. And by this, I'm going to go up here. Now, remember, anything through the entity editor is just adding by ID. But if I want to do it by rule, I can go up to group element, and I'm going to add it by property 1600. So I'm just going to type the ID of that property in here, but it's going to add all the elements related to that property. And here are those elements here. Okay. So that's the other group that I have, and this one's done by a rule. Let's say that you wanted to copy this group. All right, well, you just right click and do copy. And if you want to rename something, just do a slow double click to get into this box, and you can do this to a different name here. You can combine multiple groups by doing a control click and doing multiple ones here. Right click, and then there's the option to combine several groups together there. So that's the one I have, where it combined groups 3, 4, and 5 all together for that view. I want to show you the highlight tool. So that's this one up here. This will show what is selected. So you can see that 16 here is active. So that's what I'm viewing in my window since I'm viewing by active group right now. But if I had another one that I clicked on and then I do this highlight, it will show highlighted the elements and nodes that are over in that group instead. The last thing that I wanted to show you is viewing by multiple groups instead of active. So if you right click and go to multiple groups, you can see that all of these boxes here change a little bit. And anything that has a green plus, these are ones that are shown. And you can right click over here. If there's a specific group that you want to just show that one only, I can do that. I can also subtract part of what's in another group. So that subtracts that chunk of the elements I put over in that other group. So that's another option for some viewing of your groups that could be helpful, viewing multiple ones at once. All right, the next stuff that I'm going to go over is some advanced use of the groups. And this is all going to be under group operations. And that's automatic add, evaluate, and Booleans. So we'll go over all of those options that you have. And then I'll highlight a couple other things that you can do with groups, such as listing all the elements or nodes by ID into another program like Excel or a text editor or something like that. And then also how to use groups with neutral files. So I'm going to go back to Femap here. And let's talk about automatic add. All right. So let's show this group right here. All right, here's where I'm going to work. Okay, automatic add is one of the things that's under group operations. If you go here, when you fire up your Femap, it's going to be set on none. And what that means is any new entity, any new node element, new parts of your mesh, if you want to add it to something automatically, like the active group, or let's say you had a group in here that's called like new mesh and you wanted all new stuff to go into that group, you could do that. I have mine set to active group. So if I were to create a new element, like I'm going to do here, let's see, yeah, just. Okay, sorry. Let me try that again. All right, there we can click the notes. Okay, there's my new element that I just created. It was automatically added to this group that I have active. If you recall, this one over here does have a lot of the same properties. Why isn't it in here? Aren't I doing stuff by property in this group? And that's what we have available to us under Group Operations Evaluate. And this will evaluate all of your groups according to the rules of that group. So right now I'll just evaluate group 14, and there's the new element that I just created popping in there. The other thing I wanted to show you under group operations is Booleans. So all of these options are here under your group Booleans. If you wanted to subtract one from the other, combine a bunch, what I'm going to do is find all the elements that are in two different groups. You could even do even more. So I'm going to look at the chassis and group 15. What's in both of those? So let's go over to that group, and that would be these elements here. So go my chassis, group 14. Yep, that's the elements that are consistent between those two groups. Okay, let's say I'm looking at stuff by ID, and I need to get a list of these into a text editor or Excel. I'm doing some external post-processing. I want all of the IDs that are in here. When you go to group element ID, when you're in this dialog box, if you go to pick here, you have some options. So this copy will copy just what's in here, but that specific Femap, the way it has the text here might not actually be useful to you. You might want to do copy as list, or even there's an option, just send it straight to Excel. So give me all these IDs and it sends it straight to Excel. Now I got this long list if I need to use that for some reason. And then the other thing I'm going to highlight here is neutral files. So I got all these helpful groups in this modfem, but let's say I had a different modfem. It was like the same mesh, but it's different loading or something, but it doesn't have any groups. Can I get all these groups into that other modfem? Yeah, well, the way you're going to do that is go to group, file, export, and then neutral. And here, just uncheck everything except groups. And what that's going to do is write a neutral file that has just the group definition. So not like the entities in it, not the nodes and elements and things, just the group definition. So then I can export that, read that into another modfem, and then I'll have all my groups again. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to highlight today is some useful APIs. So this first one, element group expand, that ships with Femap, that's under your custom tools. I use this one a lot, especially if I am looking for all of the elements that are connected to a rigid or RB2 element. The rest of these APIs I'm going to show you are available on our website. Jonathan showed our website in some of his slides. If you go to that free resources, all of these APIs are available for you there. So this first one, element group expand, as I said, it ships with Femap, and I like to use it to find all of my elements that are connected to rigids. So right now I'm going up into my model info tree, and I'm going to turn off all of the types of elements except for rigids. So I'm going to right click on this checkbox here and show selected only. And I'm going to change my view from groups to just show me the full model. Here's all the rigid elements that are in my model. And the group that I'm going to create is going to be RB2s plus nearby elements. All right, so here we are with this group. I want to put all of the IDs of these rigids in there. So I'm going to click this button with the three little dots. That will bring me to element ID, and I'll just box select all of those. I'm going to switch back to viewing active group, but I'm also going to be sure to turn the rest of my elements back on. so that when you can see that I run this API, which will be under custom tools for your version of Femap. And these are all the APIs that just ship with Femap. If you go down to grouping, this first one here is element group expand. And it's going to look at all of these rigid elements that I have in this group and find all the elements that are just connected to it. So I find that really useful if I'm looking at a part, I want to look at the stress in there, but I don't want to look at the false peak stresses in those elements that are connected to rigid elements. A couple other APIs that I wanted to highlight. These are all going to be ones that we've developed here at ATA. And as I say, they are available for you to download. I have all of mine mapped to the Femap user tools. This is, you can just set your directory to something you have locally that has like all your APIs in a certain directory. And the one that I'm going to highlight for you is query find element groups or find node groups. And what I have here is it will find a certain element and what group it's in. So let's say you had like 300 groups and you're looking for one thing and you want to know just, okay, which groups is this in? It can help decipher like what part does it exist in if that's how you did your organization of your groups. So I click some element I'm searching for. I'm going to go ahead and search all my groups, but you could do like just a subset. And it will spit it out to the message window here. That element is found in these different group IDs. So that's a pretty useful one. The other one that I want to show you is exporting a group to a Nastran file. Now, you might have a whole analysis that you like to export to just one single DAT file. But oftentimes, if you're working with groups, you have a lot of different parts, and maybe you'd like to organize this externally to Femap, as every single group is going to be a different include file in your Nastran deck. So the way that this API works is that you do have to save like a modfem on the side in order to get this API to work. But you basically just check the different groups that you'd like to write Nastran files to, and it's going to write just the stuff that's in this group. It's not going to do that extra junk of, you know, case control, of book data, end data statements, none of that, just what you can use easily in an include file. And it also gives you the option to reset your format fields if you like. And it's exported all of those to my folder here, and you can see them. Let's open one of those up, and you can see it's just got grids and elements, got no end data statement, no case control. Very easy to then use this as an include file. The other API I'm going to show is pretty similar, and it is, let's say I want to use those groups as Nastran sets. Now I want to get, you know, force on this group. I want to get stress from subcase 1 here and stress from subcase 2 for this group. It can be a bit of a burden to export all of those as different sets with Femap. So we've written this API that will export all of those. So I'm going to pick the name of my file. These are going to be a few different sets. And let's do a few of these. All right. It will go ahead and write all those groups to a Nastran set. And you can see here that Nastran set all those, and they will have the ID of the group that you chose. So now we have multiple different Nastran sets in this file that we can use. Okay, one more API I'm going to show. This one is pretty slick. It will do a lot of your documentation for you. So let's say that you've got a bunch of different parts here and you need to double check the mass and CG, and you want to just query how many nodes, how many elements are in those. We wrote an API for that. So this one will be exporting information to Excel. I'm going to select just a range of groups here that I want to grab information on all those separate things. And it's going to send this over to Excel. And so it will give you the group ID, name, the range of IDs, number of nodes, range of elements, number of elements, and then your mass CG, and any length, area, and volume that you have. So that could be super useful for some of your documentation. And that's everything that I wanted to show in my demo today. So I'm going to open it up for some questions now.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. So yeah, if anyone out there has any questions, please put those in the chat or the Q&A tab now. We'll be happy to get those. We can also unmute you if you would like to just message us and say, hey, please let me unmute. We can make that happen. I guess, Laura, a quick question while we're waiting for any additional ones to come in. I know you said not covering layers, but any initial thoughts or big differences between groups and layers?
I personally find groups a lot easier to work with than layers in Femap. I find it a little bit easier to pair with Nastran, and especially, as I was mentioning, if you've got a large model with lots of parts, the groups is going to be really useful to view your model that way. Layers has some of its own quirks, and I just personally don't tend to use them.
Agreed. I'm also a group man myself. Yeah, so with that, I guess I don't see any other questions. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And again, everyone, please feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions in the coming days or weeks. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.